And thanks for staying with us here on Morning Live. Now, unveiled by President Cyril Ramaphosa in September last year, a total of 1.6 billion rand was allocated for the implementation of the Emergency Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. The plan was aimed at combating violence against women and children through a coordinated government and civil society effort. And some non-profit organizations are yet to receive funding, though, as they await a budget that's aimed at supporting programs coordinated by both government and civil society. And subsequent to the release of the funds, the Interim Steering Committee on the matter was tasked with monitoring and ensuring proper implementation. So to discuss this further, we're joined now by Dr Lesley Ann Foster, Executive Director of Masimanyane Women's Rights International, as well as Fikile Faltein, who is the Director of Victim Empowerment in the Department of Social Development. Thanks to both of you for joining us this morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much and morning to everyone.
So, Dr. Foster, let me start with you. Looking at where we started when this program was launched last year and where we find ourselves currently, how would you assess the program thus far?
Well, I think the main thing is to say that we have had the greatest political support and political commitment to gender-based violence since the total shutdown campaign came about. So for us, we've never had that in the country before. We've never had a national summit on gender-based violence. We have a declaration that was signed in March, and then we had the interim committee working steadfastly over a year to produce a national strategic plan on gender-based violence. And these are huge positives for the country because now we have a framework, we have direction, and we have the political support to address gender-based violence and femicide comprehensively in the country.
So the question then becomes, you talk about the framework, the political support and all of that, and it's taken about a year to get all of that up and running. How much has that cost in that year, and what has been done practically in terms of the disbursements of funds and actual practical work in the sense of addressing these the ills in society that this was meant to address?
The process itself couldn't be rushed because a national strategic plan to deal with an issue like gender-based violence is an enormous complex task, and it had to bring together all sectors of society. This was also something which was very different in addressing this. Government, civil society, was the private sector, and it was some of the UN agencies. And in fact, all of the UN agencies were involved. So it was a very complex issue, and there was done with discussions at provincial level. Every single province had 2 consultations to get from the ground up what people thought the solution to this problem would be. And for that reason, it becomes a very successful project. However, I think we stuck around the financing of it. The president did commit 1.6 billion to addressing the problem, and each state department was asked to redirect funds from their budgets to actually implement this plan. And the Department of Women's Affairs was actually tasked with tracking that money. Since then, what we do know is that there was 500 million committed by the Department of Basic Education, and we know for sure that 90 million went to civil society organizations. So of the 1.6 billion, 90 million was actually allocated to civil society organizations. The process of disbursing that was also complex because there was an open call for proposals. Those were brought in. They had to be scrutinized. And now I know last night I received an excited call from a group in Duchwa who said, we have been approved. It's taken a bit of time, but it's got there. The problem also is that government departments, as we know it, were being tracked by the committee and mainly by the Department of Women Affairs. They made commitments, but we were not able to track it. We were not able to track that they've actually implemented. So I'm very glad that Department of Social Development is here because Fikile can then tell us what they've done with it. What the Department of Women Affairs then decided was that because they were after not getting the information they required, they would have to track it through the audit trail and the audit reports of all the government departments to see how that money is being utilized. What this highlights for us is that we may have political level, but in the implementation, in the actual rollout of these programs, it gets stuck in the bureaucracy. And of course,
right, we seem to have lost that link there. It's frozen, it seems, to Dr. Foster. But Mr. Fikile Faltein, as Dr. Foster was saying, you can actually respond to exactly what had happened with regard to the exact tracking of that money, and also what kind of governmental programs and civil society programs were these funds actually meant to support?
Good morning, ma'am, and good morning to your viewers. Unfortunately, I could hear some of the parts of that interview, but I didn't have the benefit of everything that. But I could hear that she's making reference to the funds. I assume that it's the funds that the department has accessed, because the Department of Social Development has accessed the CARA funds, which is the Criminal Assets Recovery Account funds that are administered by the Department of Justice. The Cabinet approved a total of 100 million for the Department of Social Development. And those funds were for providing financial assistance to NGOs that provide services to victims of crime, including victims of gender-based violence. So far, the Department of Social Development has appointed the National Development Agency as an implementing partner. We also, just to clarify that there are 3 areas that are covered in that money. It's 90 million is for transfer to organizations, civil society organizations that provide services to victims of gender-based violence. But 5 million of that is for providing mentoring and coaching for emerging organizations within the sector. We've identified a gap that, especially in rural and townships, organizations are not up to standard. As a result, they are struggling to get funding. So we've decided to come up with a mentoring and coaching program as the Department of Social Development in partnership with the National Development Agency. But also to indicate that the department and the National Development Agency have issued a call for proposals in January, and by the closing date, a total of 589 proposals from organizations in all 9 provinces was received by the closing date, and a team of to conduct evaluation was set up, comprised of representatives from the Department of Social Development, NDA, as well as the representatives of the steering committee, the Gender-Based Violence Steering Committee, conducted the evaluations of those projects, looking at those projects that are responding to the terms of reference issued in the call of proposals. But a total of 312 organizations have been recommended for funding. And to date, we conducted, in fact, we wanted to do a physical verification of all to visit those organizations to verify just before the lockdown. But when the lockdown was announced, that disrupted that program. So we had to wait. But under level 3, we managed to find ways to verify non-physically by requesting documents but also by using our provincial departments and NDE sites in the provinces because of their proximity for verification. Now, all of the organizations that are recommended have been verified, and the process of contracting for all the qualifying organizations has been conducted, and to date, a total of 170 organizations have signed the contracts, but a total of 131 organizations have been paid their first tranche. Because we mitigating the risk, we're paying the funds to the organization's account in tranches.
Okay.
50% of the first tranche. Then when they performance submit a report after the implementation of the activities, then we transfer another 50%. To date, a total of 17.4 million has been transferred to these organizations, but that also indicates that another 50% has been committed as part of that. Another 17.4 million has been committed to those organizations. NDA continuing with verification and contracting with the rest of the organizations. Every day the numbers will change because that process is currently underway.
Okay.
That we funding organizations as they come. Some submit documents, and when there's an gray area, then there's a to and from to verify part of verification of those organizations, and also supporting documents for the contracting.
Mr. Faltein, how much has been paid to date? Let me ask, how much has been spent overall from that 1.6 billion rand? How much has been spent? Because you're talking about 17.5 being paid to organizations with the pledge of another 17.5, but how much has been spent overall?
Ma'am, the 1.6 billion, maybe I should have clarified that first, that it's money that has been committed by government by reprioritizing. The various departments are reprioritizing from their budget. It's not necessarily a one budget that is sitting in social development. Yes. Social development also has reprioritized its own budget.
Dr. Foster explained that. She explained that. So my question is, how much has been spent?
Ma'am, I already know of the 1.6 billion, because that is sitting in the presidency, and then maybe the people from the GBVF Steering Committee will be in the better position. But I'm only able to indicate what has been spent from what we committed from the social development side.
But it's actually quite unsatisfactory.
To date, social development has paid 34.8 million rand has been committed to that process, and the process is underway to verify more organizations. But the total that has been committed is the 90 million that will be going to organizations, but 5 million will be for mentoring and coaching, as indicated.
Dr. Foster, you are part of the Interim Steering Committee to advise government, and it's a simple question, really. You explained exactly, how much was committed, the various departments, and what they had pledged to give. But how much has been spent to date?
Well, all we were able to track was the 90 million. And even the commitments that were made by all, because there were several government departments that had to make commitments to this. We were never able to track that. Department of Women Affairs sent several communications asking how this money was spent, and that was never, ever confirmed or verified. So what we said was we have to track that through the audit process, because that's the only way we're going to be able to know if this money was spent. And this is exactly the point I'm trying to make. We get the political commitment, we get the interest of government, we get all of the support for it, and then it falls short in the implementation. I want to say something about social development. I think social development really needs to look into, it's done the job now of dispersing the 80 million. Some of it has gone to mentoring. But as to this day, 5 months since the beginning of this new year, some of our organizations, and I suspect there'll be many of them, have not received any funding at all. We've signed service level agreements and so forth. So there are flaws in the system that have to be taken into account. Women on the ground are not getting the money that is needed to turn this gender-based violence problem around. And it's a problem within the system that needs to be changed because it's not enough to have political will implementation. And I think that these are the struggles that we have as women activists, is saying, we take to the streets, and we are going to take to the streets again if this money is not knocked loose and if the problem is not addressed. Something else always becomes more important than addressing gender-based violence, and yet gender-based violence is affecting more than half the women in this country. We need more than just the political will. We need the energy. We need the implementation strategies that are supported by all government departments and by all stakeholders as such. It's not just government, because it's civil society as well. We will bring our bit to the party if we are given the support that we need to make that happen.
I'll tell you what, this conversation is far from over, but we unfortunately have to stop it here. Thank you so much, Dr. Lesley Ann Foster, the Executive Director of Masimanyane Women's Rights International, as well as Fikile Faltein, Director of Victim Empowerment in the Social Development Department, for talking to us about the allocation of the 1.6 billion rand fund that's meant to help end gender-based violence and femicide. It is a problem that we cannot track exactly where the money has gone and how much has been spent, the commitments made. But as Dr. Foster says, you can have the political will, but if the money isn't actually reaching the women on the ground, what exactly are we doing? So this conversation will definitely continue at a later stage. Let's take a break before we say goodbye to our SABC2 viewers.